We'll see how this goes. I have to have the microphone a little bit higher because I talk really loud, and so I don't want it to blare into here. Let's see here. Number 1. Ready? Mod 9, practice test. Number 1, D. Number 2, A. Number 3, C. Number 4, B. Number 5, C. Number 6, D. Number 7, B. Number 8, C. Number 9, D. Number 10, C. Number 11, C. Number 12, C. Number 13, D. Number 14, C. Number 15, B. Number 16, C. Number 17, D. And number 18, B. Any questions? If you don't have any, take out mod 34 while he's looking. Take your time. Okay, number 5. Okay, so the question is, how would refusing to let somebody join a club be aggression? So let's walk through this. Number 5 reads, which of the following is an example of relational aggression? What did you put down? A is incorrect. It says Billy kicks Bobby in the shin because he is mad at him. That is not relational aggression. That is direct aggression, or we could sometimes argue physical aggression. Relational aggression means that we're not going to let you be part of our relationship. We're not going to let you be part of our group. In this case, an actual group. So we have different types. That's the confusing part about psych, is that you change one word, it completely changes everything. Good? Okay, mod 34. We went over 32. We did not go over 34. '34 is a little bit more straightforward. Ready? Number 1, D. Number 2, A. Number 3, D. Number 4, B. Number 5, B. Number 6, B. Number 7, C. Number 8, D. Number 9, B. Number 10, C. Number 11, C. Number 12, D. Number 13, D. Number 14, A. Number 15, D. Number 16, D. Number 17, D. Number 18, D. Number 19, A. And number 20, B. The first thing you should notice is that there's a whole bunch of D's in a row, and many of you start to second guess yourself on a real test. Don't. There is no correlation, especially when people who know how to write tests do stuff. Sometimes they'll do that stuff in order to get you to screw up. Any questions on mod 34? Yes? I'll get you one after class, okay? Yep. And this is where this helps you, because you can go back and watch and get the answers. Take the test before you get the answers, though. It's far more beneficial. Good. All right. Go ahead, take a picture, do whatever you want of this. This is what we're going to be talking about up on the screen for those of you following along at home. If you want to write it down, so be it. If you want to take a picture at the end, we can do that. Here's how I'm going to do these for reviews, is I'm simply going to say what it says, and then I'm going to ask for you to tell me what it is, and then I'll help clarify knowledge. Right? It's very boring for me to sit here and talk the whole hour on a review. In addition, the more I talk and the less you talk, the less you learn in this setting. So number 1, what does the medical model mean? What do we mean by the medical model? Yep, I'm right up there. As far as notes, not exactly. No, I clustered them The review and organization of themes. So it's not going to be straight through in order of your notes. Sure. So the medical model is the idea of all psychological disorders having some kind of, in general, medical or biological causation, meaning that we can cure them, and the majority of those cures are a medicine, which is a drug. What important psychology book is based on this? Yep, the DSM, right? And so that, the textbook we're using is outdated in that. It says DSM-4. We are now in the DSM-5. That is a diagnostic manual that we use to help classify and organize traits and characteristics so we can identify the disorder. So it's trying to take something that's kind of mushy, psychological disorders, and whether you're treated in California, Minnesota, or Saudi Arabia, they can use that as a way to categorize and then help treat. Nature versus nurture. All right. We get the basic argument, so that shouldn't need much, but give me something that you didn't know before you walked in the door that we can attribute to parenting as nurture, not nature. How are you influenced? And again, when we say you, we're generalizing. How are you influenced by nature, by your by nurture, by your parents?
What kind of the sports example, like you think you love a sport because of the sport and interest, but really it's because of how your parents react to it or what they put you into it or what they like.
Good. So a lot of your likes are based on the responses, emotional responses your parents feed into you. And not just your parents, other people, but a lot of your likes are based on the predispositions of your parents. Give me 3 things about you specifically we can attribute to your parents for the majority of people. Good. Your religious belief is the first. Yes, mannerisms and behavior. Nick McGrath. Political beliefs. So if you want to help with that, think about, if you want to put names to this stuff, you could say Danny Steiner. His family has very similar personality traits, very nice, very happy-go-lucky, right? Very affable people. For political beliefs, you could think Nick McGrath, very, very politically leaning, very strong and firm in that. And then for religion, Lutz, I guess you could use for that. Very devoutly religious and the same religion as his parents. And we could directly attribute that to parenting. We can talk about parenting styles as well. Tell me how parenting affects your temperament, your personality. If your parents are really angry, you're probably going to be angry. Correct. That's nature. Now let's look at nurture. You're not wrong, but let's look at nurture.
Like the whole thing with the baby and like, was it this cousin who mentioned it?
Yep.
Like, yeah, and like you just pretend to ignore the baby and then it like starts crying and stuff, and like those are the kids that probably get like anxiety or something.
Okay, so we took a little bit of a right turn because we went hard extreme into disorders. So what we have is an initial thing, you're right, with a baby who is a very calm, mellow baby. And then the parent's response to that will dictate how strongly that manifests. So if the parents take the approach of this is a very mellow, easy baby, so I don't have to do much, and I'm just going to leave him content, then that child will stay really mellow and withdrawn and introverted. And not necessarily in a disordered manner, just they're going to be a quieter kid. If you have parents that encourage them to come out of that and be really active, then that child will. So you have the nature, inherently slow response system, so a much more mellow baby, and you have parents who either encourage or discourage that, and that will, think about it like a dimmer light on a switch. How bright will that characteristic be? Okay? Culture. Something you learned about culture and its influence on you. This is obviously nurture, not nature. Good, so we grew up in a really sports town. A lot of people are going to play sports. What else? Minnesota versus New York. Calmer, nicer, more polite. I would argue superficially nice. I don't think Minnesotans are any nicer than people on the East Coast. They just are fake nice to your face more than people from the East Coast are, right? It's the whole, hey, how you doing? Don't come into my yard. I'm not running you over, right? So we have that passive-aggressive Minnesota nice, so that would be cultural. How about our mannerisms? What did we see the picture of? Good, the 2 Iranian men who greet each other by kissing on the lips, right? And for us, that is not something that's a normal cultural mannerism, okay? East versus West. What role does that play?
Kind of like the school thing. Like if you're from like China or something, it's they're basically if you aren't good at school, you're kind of out.
Good, so much more rigorous, much more adherence to that. In this school, or in this country, if you're not doing well in school, do we say your life is done in academics and you can never get another chance? No, we're like, well, maybe that kid takes longer. So we have strict adherence to the group in China, and we have much more focus on the individual here. And so we see this in a lot of things. Respect. You couldn't have, if you think about China, the government tells you how many kids you can have. In America, our culture wouldn't ever let our government do that to us. Or at least I can't imagine it, because we're like, the government has no right to tell me how many kids I can have. And in a culture like China, they're like, okay, I guess the government told us we can't, so we're not going to. There's a much more strict adherence to those things. Gender roles, something we learned that we didn't know.
Boys and girls are actually a lot of like, isn't it like only 10%?
Oh, good guess. That was actually siblings.
Siblings.
That was siblings. That was only 10% difference. How can we prove little boys and little girls are different genetically?
The hypothalamus is
Good, we talked about the hypothalamus, so we have differences in brains. That's developed when little fetuses get what hormone? Testosterone. All fetuses start off as girls, right? So we have that. How about behaviorally?
little girls. Sorry, you go. Well, like I don't know if this is just older, but men tend to be more aggressive.
Not always, not just older. Little males are far more aggressive. Give me examples of male behavior that's aggressive. Yes? Good. So little boys are competitive, little girls are cooperative. How about, so that's a physical thing. What about the way that they communicate?
Like women speak earlier then?
Good, so they develop, and we'll get to that. That actually isn't as important in this unit, but you're right, girls develop speech early. How about the way they speak, not their ability to speak? The way that they communicate. Do women yell at each other as often as men do? No. Think about the types of communication. Who is more likely to be considered rude, a man or a woman? A man. Now, I'm not just saying considered. A man is more likely to be rude. They're more likely to do different types of behavior that we would consider aggressive. So it's not just physical aggression. What do we see as far as scientific evidence for a genetic predisposition to male and female behavioral patterns? I showed you a study from Texas A&M.
Oh, was it about the grades?
The what?
Toys.
Not the grades, the toys. So what about the monkeys? Good. The male monkeys played longer with the trucks. The females played longer with the dolls. And with the books, it was even, right? So we have some genetic evidence to say that there's a predisposition towards certain things. Excuse me, disorders now. How do we define that something is a disorder? And when I say define, I mean diagnose. How do we define that something's a disorder? Good. Distressful, dysfunctional, and deviant. And it doesn't matter the order, but we will say if it is dysfunctional, immediately we say this is a disorder, right? But it typically has to have all three. The only reason we say that it has to be, if it's dysfunctional, we say it's a disorder, is because some disorders are not distressful for the individual, but it is obviously deviant and dysfunctional. So we see, hey, this isn't distressful. It doesn't bother them that they're like this, and that's part of the disorder. Mood disorders. Give me an example of a mood disorder. Bipolar. Good. We'll start with bipolar. How can I tell the difference between bipolar and depression?
Bipolar has like high ups and high.
Good. So we have high ups, high downs. We have mood swings. What chemical or hormone can we measure that shows us which state they're in?
Oh, I remember looking at it. It's the one that starts with an N, I think.
Serotonin and norepinephrine, right? And one is the horse, one is the buggy. So if somebody's depressed, we give them norepinephrine because it will pull the serotonin along, right? So it's the idea that those two things are going to be gone in depression. Now, I'm skipping from disorders. I better draw this because people at home can't see. So I'm here, and we're talking about depression, and what I want to do, and this is what makes it challenging. You guys are used to tests where you've identified it, so it's good. That's just the beginning of the question. That hasn't even gotten to the answer. We're going to go down to the field's disciplines and the giants, right? And we're going to say this, all right, give me a psychoanalytical cause for depression. Good, give me a specific childhood problems. I like that you went right to that because that does make it easy. Good, you have an abusive father. Who is likely to end up with depression because of that? A male or a female? More likely a female. Now, both could, but for a lot of males, it will instead be a what disorder? Anti-personality disorder or some kind of anxiety disorder, right? Specifically, anxiety disorder. We talked about how to treat depression from a medical model. It's giving them which drug? Typically, we, according to the textbook, a norepinephrine that will increase their levels of norepinephrine and serotonin. Anxiety disorder, give me 3 that are similar so we can start to tell them apart. Somebody give me one. Panic disorder, somebody give me another. That's not an anxiety disorder. What's that? PTSD and? Yes, OCD. So, okay, so those are 3. OCD, panic disorder, and PTSD. How is panic disorder different than PTSD? Good, so it's intermittent, not persistent. What else is different about it? Good, so PTSD, we have a trigger. Something caused this. Panic disorder, we don't. If we have a trigger for a panic disorder, it's not a panic disorder. Something causes intense fear. What is that now called? A phobia. See the difference? So generalized anxiety disorder is kind of like PTSD, but we don't know what caused it. Phobia is a panic disorder, but with a trigger. Make sense? So that's what we need to be able to tell the difference apart. Personality disorders, give me one, Autumn. Antisocial personality disorder. What is wrong with that? What part of the brain is not developed enough or is under functioning in that? Good, the frontal cortex. Give me another group of people that act similar to people with antisocial personality disorder. In some ways, narcissistic NPD would be similar, but I'm thinking about a group of people we don't diagnose with a psychological disorder whose frontal lobes are underdeveloped and act in many of the same ways as antisocial personality disorder. Teenagers. So we have people who are impulsive, insensitive, irrational, aggressive. That's teenage years, right? And that's the same thing. We have an underdeveloped or a developing frontal lobe, etc. Give me another type of disorder that doesn't fit all of those, or it doesn't fit any of those. OCD would be under anxiety disorders. Somatoform disorders would be one. Very good. So we have conversion disorder and hypochondriasis. Any others? Schizophrenia. Sleep disorders. Right? There's a bunch of different things. Okay? So that would be all those other ones. Causes based on perspective. So again, now we're going back to this. Right? See how it ties in? And this is what makes this class challenging, and psychology in general challenging, is that it's an applied field. It's not just theoretical. So we have to be able to take our understanding of mood disorders and our understanding of clinical perspectives and then say, how are those two things connected? So give me a genetic or evolutionary cause for anxiety disorders. Good, so it's inherited. Give me another cause. Physiological cause. What's wrong with that individual? We know it's inherited. What may be a physiological cause for somebody to have an anxiety disorder? I don't understand. That's not genetic. That would be social. Good, we haven't figured that out yet. There's something in their brain that is too aroused. And so they're constantly twitchy. Think of the people who are high maintenance, the people who are high stress. So that could be a physiological response. The opposite of that baby we talked about earlier where they're a really mellow baby, you have a really hyper baby. Okay? So maybe there's something genetically that would cause that. General drug neurotransmitter knowledge, we talked about that. The main thing is norepinephrine and serotonin and which disorders they'd be present in and what would be the cause. Terminology, this is just vocabulary that, and this is another thing, your first couple of years of college are learning terminology for your field. So what's inhibit versus stimulate? Give me the definition of either one of them. What does inhibit or stimulate mean? Yeah. Yeah, I like depress it better than stop it because inhibit means to restrict or to make it less. So stimulate must mean make it more, to increase it. So there are things that will inhibit some things and some things that will stimulate it. Obviously in this we're probably talking about something in the biological perspective, typically drugs, those kind of things. But we can also talk about behavioral where we can inhibit people's behavior, so we're going to try and decrease that manifestation. Depress versus arouse in terms of psychology. Very good. So in an anxiety disorder, it's going to be aroused. If you have depression, it's going to be depressed. The mistake is people think depression means sad. So alcohol is a depressant. But when you think about that, you don't think people who drink are always sad, right? It's what it's doing is depressing or slowing down some of your neural functions. So it's depressing those things. Okay. Self-fulfilling prophecies. Anybody know what that means? Correct. If you think it too much, it's going to happen. So on Monday, you have a test. I've told you it's challenging. I've also made sure to tell you that students ace this thing. Not many, but some do. Because I want you to know it's challenging so that you will study and prepare. But I want to make sure that you know you can have success so that you, good, you go in with confidence. If you think, I'm stupid, I suck, I don't do well at psych, I don't understand this stuff, I'm going to fail the test, and you firmly believe that, well then yeah, you're probably going to fail that test. If you say, I'm not going to do well on this test unless I make sure I prepare like mad, unless I work my butt off, that's not a self-fulfilling prophecy in the sense that it's leading you to make sure that you work harder. Adaptive versus maladaptive. What do we think that means? React in a good way to it or react in a bad way to it. I would say that's more optimist or pessimist. I would say adaptive versus maladaptive. Autumn, you had something?
Well, I mean, I'm just gonna say what I know of what adaptive is.
So what is it?
Changing to be better.
Good. Adaptive is changing to be better. So that's why I want to say not reacting in a good way or a bad way because it could get confusing. We want to be very precise. Adaptive means you are changing in a way that leads to better results. Maladaptive means the way that you are changing actually doesn't lead to better results and sometimes leads to worse results. So you're having a bad day at work and you don't really like your job. Give me a maladaptive behavior. Drinking. So you drink because you're unhappy at work. Does that fix the problem? No, and in fact it might lead to more problems. Give me other problems that could be caused because of that behavior. Alcoholism, depression, relationship problems, money problems, all that stuff. An adaptive behavior would be to get a better job or change your attitude, right? Introspection. If I say somebody's introspective, what do I mean? Focus on themselves, they're in their own head, they're thinking. So we're going to talk about some of these things on the test and your ability to be introspective, right? Pruning. In horticulture, what does pruning mean? Good, cutting off the bad leaves. In psychology, what does pruning mean? Good, cutting off the bad stuff. Nothing more different than that, right? You're going to get rid of the extra stuff you don't need. You're going to prune, and your brain does this all the time. It prunes the stuff that you don't need, that you don't use. Shaping, I would think of like pottery. You work with what you have and you change it to fit what you need. So we can think about you start off with a base behavior that we want to become something else, training a dog, teaching a kid to be potty trained, those kind of things, and then you slowly mold them until they get to the shape that we want. Temperament. Dogs. You've heard the term temperament with dogs. What does that mean? What's that? how aggressive they are. Some people have an aggressive temperament. Some dogs are, oh, that's, you know, that breed has a really, really high-strung aggressive temperament. I don't know if that's good for kids. Temperament means kind of an overarching way to look at your personality, especially when we think of things like aggressiveness versus passiveness. So your natural temperament. I'm very high-strung. That's very obvious, right? My wife is the exact opposite. She's very mellow and easygoing, okay? That's their natural temperament. Generalization. Good. Taking a specific and applying it to bigger groups. Linkage. Look it up. That's what I'm going to tell you, right? Read about it, find it. There's a small section in there. If you can't find it, talk to me, but you got to know what linkage is. And in the amount of time I have, we're not going to cover it. But you do have to know for one small specific spot that you have to understand what linkage is, okay? Fields and disciplines. What do I mean by and giants? The big names in there. So clinical, experimental, applied, and organizational. So how do I study for this test? Let's take depression and tell me what a clinical psychologist would do regarding depression. Good, they'd give them norepinephrine. They're going to treat people who are suffering from depression. Give me somebody who's an experimental psychologist. What are they going to be doing with depression? Good, so they're going to be trying to develop treatments for those people. Hey, what if it's this drug in combination with this? What if it's this talk therapy combined with this behavioral therapy? Give me somebody who's applied psychology with depression. And how is it different than clinical? Awesome, so we're going to look at certain fields that are very specific and we're going to apply a treatment, understood and experimental, to a specific situation. Industrial, organizational. It doesn't fit. So not every field is going to work with everything. And so you should understand why organizational doesn't have anything to do necessarily specifically with depression. Social, cognitive, behavioral, psychoanalytical, biopsychosocial, humanism, evolutionary. You should know keywords. That's basically the first thing we did in this. Keywords and key names. If you're not sure of a general idea how to tell the difference between those, start there. Have a general idea of how is social cognitive different than humanism, right? And we're going to go over all of them in more detail, but you have to have a basic underlying foundation of how they're different. And then lastly, I have some big names that go with it. Any questions on this? Good. Here, then, is how the test is broken down. Let me move. Uh-oh. Will that move? There we go. There we go. So, Mod 1, feel free to, again, take pictures. Those of you watching at home, just pause. But here's what we do is we've got Mod 1, history and studying of psychology. You can get out of your desks and move closer, you know. We have 6 questions from that. The models and perspectives, I will tell you this. This is some of the most challenging stuff, in my opinion, is that second one. Mood disorders. A lot of that you're going to assume is just simply identification, and some of it will be identification of mood and other disorders, but it's going to also be application. So not only what does this person have, but how would this person be treated by somebody, and combining 4 or 5 different streams of thought. That's what makes this challenging. Nature versus nurture, I feel good about. Cultural differences is part of nature nurture, but I wanted to specify that you spent a little bit extra time making sure you understand differences between Eastern and Western philosophy and culture and how that would manifest itself. And then random stuff, thinking, comprehension, all that. Are there any questions on this?
So the numbers are how many?
How many questions out of 50? Correct. There's 2 points each. And I know that, like, like right there, looking at your eyes, you're like, oh, that makes it worth more. No, it's not. Here's the key, is what... Did you see that? He was like just twirling as he was going down the halls. The reason I do it that way is to make the math work for how they wanted the grades set up. It shouldn't matter that each one's worth 2 points, right? Because what matters is what percentage of your grade is tests, and it's 40%. That's what matters, okay? Good? Yes, Taylor. Yes, the giants are talking about Freud and Watson and Skinner. What you need to know at this point is not intricacies of them, but which can you match Freud to psychoanalytical. And then can you match Freud to psychoanalytical and what psychoanalytical thinks, meaning childhood, abuse, repression, defense mechanisms, those kind of things. Sabrina.
So like the second one,
Yes, models and perspectives is social cognitive, it's psychoanalytical, and then it's beyond just identifying. It's having a very basic level of understanding so that you can apply them later. Good?